So today we're going to talk a little bit about the latest offering from Dell EMC around the mid-range storage area, which is the Powerstore system. I'll be talking a little bit about some of the new capabilities, in my opinion, were really cool with this storage subsystem. And also some of the confusions around the messaging with this particular storage subsystem, and it may or may not fit in your environment. As always, if you like the content, please click subscribe, or if the content makes sense, do click subscribe. Alternatively, do leave me a comment below. Also, the opinions that I provide in this video is strictly my opinions and my opinions alone, and it has nothing to do with who I work for. Having said that, let's get straight into it. So the Powerstore system, where does it actually fit in the scale of products that Dell EMC has? As you may know, Dell EMC has a plethora of storage system, from the mid-entry level to the super high-end stuff in the Power Max. Interestingly enough, the Dell's acquisition of EMC made the mid-range portfolio a little bit more convoluted than usual. So on the Dell side of the fence, you had EqualLogic and Compellent, and then on EMC side, you had the Unity storage, which was the bread and butter for many years. In some sense, I think the Powerstore was a breath of fresh air. It was finally one product range to actually amalgamate all these three other storage systems into one family. The Powerstore series came in two flavors. One, the Powerstore T, and the other, Powerstore X. So what's the difference between these two flavors of Powerstore? So Powerstore T is very much similar to what you've always been used to. It's just the two controllers and then you scale up as you go. But one interesting thing about Powerstore T this time is the ability to actually cluster up to 4 separate arrays into one gigantic array. It's pretty cool that you can actually cluster a whole bunch of arrays together. But you know, if this storage is kind of targeted at the mid-range kind of play, I'm not too sure how many customers would actually require 4 subsystems. Nonetheless, I personally feel it's actually a pretty damn cool feature. Having said that, other than the fact that you can cluster stuff together, effectively it is another subsystem with just more CPU compute and a very big storage. Nothing really exciting in that sense. The other variant of Powerstore is a little bit more interesting, the Powerstore X. It's interesting because it comes pre-installed with vSphere. So some of you might be thinking, hang on, isn't that a little bit like hyperconverged? Where you have storage and compute all in one? It's kind of yes and no, because this time you have a hypervisor inside, but at the same time, the controller is actually a VM instead of how VxRail and vSAN was baked into the kernel. And hence, Dell EMC is saying that the Powerstore positioning is very different from VxRail. VxRail will still be a HCI of choice, and Powerstore X is not a HCI appliance. So what kind of use cases will PowerX be positioned for? So according to Dell EMC's materials, they are saying that it's targeted at high performance databases that needs to have dedicated storage, where a traditional SAN will probably be a better fit than like the likes of VxRail. Personally, I'm not super convinced though. I mean, as many of us know, storage today is relatively fast, regardless whether it's VxRail or even on the traditional SAN. As much as it's closer to the storage, yes, I'll give you that, you might be a little bit faster. I have a different thought with regards to a dedicated storage subsystem just for a couple of apps. Why do I actually say that? Unlike the Powerstore T, the Powerstore X doesn't allow you to cluster multiple storage subsystems. That simply means whatever controller that you have bought as part of the storage actually remains. You can only ever add the drives and not compute. Of course, there'll be use cases where you have a need for maybe just 2 or 3 VMs, or maybe 10, 15 VMs that require a whole bucket load of storage. And in that sense, I think the Powerstore works extremely well, because then you can have like 100 drives or 200 drives dedicated to maybe 10 VMs or 20 VMs. So in recent time, there is a lot of talk about storage integration into VMware Cloud Foundation or VCF. So it'll be interesting to see how X and T fit into that ecosystem. To begin with, Powerstore T will have no issues fitting into the VCF ecosystem, partly because it's seen as traditional SAN. You can connect it via fiber channel or NFS, whichever flavor of your choice. and we can just present it as primary or secondary storage. On the other hand, the X is connected through vSphere via vVols. I mean, of course, you can also integrate them into VCF via iSCSI and perhaps NFS. From a VCF perspective, you can't actually use it as primary storage. You can only use it as supplementary storage. So what's the difference between primary and supplementary storage, you may ask? I forgot to kind of, talk a little bit about that. So primary storage on VCF simply means that when you start a workload domain, you can actually define the storage as the one that you built the domain on. Supplementary storage can only be added subsequently after the domain has been created. So that simply means that you can't actually use vVols to bring up a cluster, but you can actually subsequently add it in if you needed to. It's also very important to note that with the Powerstore X, the vSphere instance in there can't be included into the VCF lifecycle management. I know VCF does all this cool stuff about lifecycle management, but because it is not something that was provisioned by VCF, hence we can't actually lifecycle and manage it. If you need to manage the vSphere instance on Powerstore X, you need an external vCenter. It is not supported to have vCenter installed on the same unit. There's also discussion about container use cases and how this is a container-based storage with regards to Powerstore X. But just so there's no confusion, we are not talking about VMware Tanzu at all. So there's no Tanzu specifically on Powerstore X. So it is some flavor of containers that I'm not very sure of, so I shall not comment too much, but for sure, it is actually not VMware Tanzu. Having said that, I still feel the Powerstore X is one of the more exciting storage that has come out in recent times. It is definitely something different. I mean, compared to the Powerstore T, which is really a like-for-like replacement, maybe more powerful and larger scale like storage usually become. But Powerstore X, in my opinion, is probably a version 1 of what's to come in the landscape of storage moving forward. I'm sure you're going to hear a lot more coming from Dell EMC in the coming months with regards to this particular product. It's certainly very, very exciting, and I feel that, potentially there is a lot more that can be done on this platform. Having said that as well, some of the competitors for Dell EMC have actually started jumping at the product. I have left some very interesting links at the bottom. You may want to go check that out and see what other people are talking about that platform. So thanks for watching. I hope you've gotten a little bit of a summary of what the Powerstore launch is about, cutting through a lot of the marketing fluff. And till next time,